The new CTO, Marcus, stood in front of the sleek glass wall, covered in buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and a pyramid labeled agile transformation. He looked at me, Julia, a principal engineer, and scoffed. "Your job title says principal engineer, but your code reads like it's allergic to modern frameworks." I didn't flinch. I just blinked, then turned back to my terminal. In my world, the ad platform was green. Uptime was 99.997%, and revenue-generating campaigns were humming because my inelegant code, patched together through countless late nights and coffee-fueled sprints, simply worked. No dogma, no architectural grandstanding, just functional code. But Marcus didn't care. He swept in, dressed like a Silicon Valley prophet, high on investor confidence and low on practical wisdom. Before he arrived, I was the quiet force. I skipped all-hands meetings, never raised my hand during Q&A. My Slack emoji was a simple gear icon, yet my influence was everywhere. The background processors no one dared touch. The data pipelines that seamlessly handled broken API feeds. The load balancers meticulously tuned with surgical precision. I wasn't flashy. I was foundational. Marcus didn't believe in foundations. In his onboarding speech, he declared our codebase a monolith of legacy debt and announced a microservices first rewrite initiative. The room was filled with empty phrases like cloud-native paradigms and developer empowerment metrics. Half the room nodded. The other half were too stunned to react. I just scrolled through error logs, silently fixing a critical ad-serving bug no one else had even noticed yet. First came the new project management tools, then the stricter coding standards, then the quiet departures. Older developers, who truly understood the system's intricacies, started disappearing, replaced by fresh hires with polished LinkedIn profiles and no real-world battle scars. They coded fast, but the platform slowed. Latencies crept in like a silent virus. No one knew why, except me. I knew exactly why. It wasn't the code that was inelegant. It was the understanding. Marcus didn't just dismiss the past. He declared war on it. And I, whether I liked it or not, was the past. My tools were Python, Go, and bare metal Kubernetes, not because it was trendy, but because it was the fastest way to keep the lights on. I wasn't a coder. I was a systems architect with calloused hands and a flawless track record. Now, this guy, who wore sneakers with a suit, wanted to replace me with shiny dashboards. The cracks started subtly. Marcus's star hire tried to refactor the user authentication service and triggered a massive memory leak in production. I fixed it silently with a backdoor script I never told anyone about. I didn't want praise. I wanted peace. Then came the legacy code review. Marcus pulled me into a room and projected my main repository like it was a crime scene. He circled lines in red. "This part has no inline comments. This looks like spaghetti code. You used a single-line conditional in T3? I raised my eyes. "That line is why our ad impressions haven't been double-counted in 18 months. Marcus paused, then smirked. "Doesn't make it elegant." I walked out of the room after that. I knew what was coming. I started backing things up quietly. My scripts, my notebooks, my license history. Not out of paranoia, but preparation. I wasn't scared of being fired. I was scared of what would happen after. Marcus continued pruning. Engineers left with their Slack profiles still active. The wiki turned into a ghost town. Meanwhile, Marcus strutted around with graphs showing code freshness and team velocity, like a doctor showing x-rays to a corpse. And through all of it, I kept the heartbeat steady. My cron jobs purged stale user tokens. My background workers cleaned up orphaned ad campaigns. My handcrafted async tasks ensured no customer ever saw the chaos brewing inside. But Marcus never asked about outcomes, just optics. I watched him give a presentation to the board, bragging about how he'd refactored 60% of legacy dependencies in 2 months. What he didn't mention was that nearly all of them still ran through a single thread, the old open-source library that powered the company's core ad-serving mesh. A library Marcus even praised on LinkedIn in a post titled, "Celebrating OSS Heroes." I saw it. I didn't like irony, but this tasted sweet. Because what Marcus didn't know, what no one knew, was that the library was mine. I wrote it 5 years ago, maintained it in obscurity, and released it under a strict, business-hostile license. And the company used it. A lot. That night, I went home and opened my terminal. I typed a single command to trace the current production traffic patterns and smiled. Every heartbeat in the system ran through my veins, and they had just started cutting me off. The conference room smelled like cold brew and ego. Marcus stood at the head of the glass tomb, wearing his signature startup guru outfit, tight slacks, an untucked white button-down, and that smug little half-smile he probably practiced in the mirror. He had a MacBook open, projecting a pie chart with the title Engineering Efficiency Index in Comic Sans, like it was an inside joke. It wasn't. "Let's be honest," he said, waving a hand like he was conducting an orchestra of incompetence. "Some of the older devs have been cruising. Legacy thinking slows velocity. We need engineers who ship, not maintain." I watched as names flashed across the screen. David, the guy who built our original billing module, gone. Sarah, who architected the CI/CD pipeline that kept deploys flowing, gone. No one said it out loud, but it was a purge. One by one, senior engineers were either performance reviewed into growth opportunities or given severance with a thin HR smile. Then it was my turn. They didn't even bother calling it a review. My calendar invite read Q2 Scalability Alignment Discussion. I walked in. Marcus was already seated, flanked by a new HR rep who looked like she'd been hired from LinkedIn the night before. Marcus tapped the spacebar. My screen lit up with Git commits, Jira ticket stats, and some graph he clearly didn't understand. "Julia, your delivery cadence is stable, but stable isn't scalable. We need elegant, investor-facing architecture, and frankly, a lot of your services, while technically sound, lack modern design." I stared at him. What do investor optics have to do with whether or not the ad scheduler runs at 3:02 a.m. without waking the entire dev team with a PagerDuty alert? Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers like a budget Bond villain. "It's about narrative. We can't grow if our codebase looks like a salvage yard." I didn't blink. That salvage yard handles $12 million a month in ad events without a single double charge. "That may be," he said, smiling like a man who just read a Medium post on leading with empathy, "but we're shifting toward a proactive future. High-velocity, composable first engineering." I didn't argue again because, in that moment, I understood something chilling. Marcus wasn't talking about code. He was talking about control. He clicked to the next slide, highlighting team inspiration. A picture of a GitHub README from an open-source background task library he claimed saved the company thousands in compute. It was my library. He didn't even know it. He was standing there, using my own blood-soaked work as a trophy in the meeting where he was trying to bury me. I bit my lip so hard it stung. The HR rep handed me a printed growth plan that was little more than a pink slip on layaway. Marcus ended the meeting with, "You're smart, Julia. I'm sure you'll land on your feet, but we have to think about scalability." I walked out, cheeks burning, humiliated. But under the burning ember of embarrassment was something sharper. Rage. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I went home, turned off my phone, and opened the terminal. First, I verified the library's license, my original repo, hosted under an MIT-like shell, but with one key clause. Commercial internal use in a for-profit environment requires explicit written consent and active license registration. Then I did the deeper dig. I pulled the package registry logs, the company's internal forks, the Docker image layers. Every single one was rooted in my open source code. They hadn't even changed the default configuration values. The bastards were running production services with my name still in the comments. I started downloading everything, not maliciously, but methodically. Logs, commit history, integration reports, API keys from decommissioned projects, dependency trees showing exactly how many functions, endpoints, and critical queues still pass through my code. By midnight, I had a folder labeled Compliance Evidence. No announcement, no Slack goodbye, no social media post. Just cold, deliberate documentation. I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to shout. I was going to wait, watch, and let Marcus keep swinging his axe, unaware that the tree he was cutting down was the one holding up the entire forest. The email came at 2:14 p.m. Subject line, immediate termination, engineering transition. No greeting, no explanation, just HR sanitized bullets and a calendar link to process your departure. Slack cut off mid-thread, VPN revoked, GitHub keys dead. I couldn't even pull my own code snippets from the cloud IDE. No one spoke to me. Not Marcus, not the PMs, not even the junior devs I mentored through their first flameout deploys. They didn't even have the decency to call it a layoff. It was surgical, silent, Marcus's brand of bloodletting. I stared at my laptop screen for 5 seconds, then 10, then 30. Nothing moved. The chair across from my desk was still warm from the morning stand-up where I'd explained for the 4th time why the new notification system couldn't be decoupled from the legacy auth service without throttling the refresh token rotation. They nodded, said, "Cool, cool," then went back to logging stories about animated buttons. And now, I was gone. No thanks, no severance, just a blank goodbye calendar invite and an HR drone named Callie who said, "Please return any company assets to the lobby desk by 5:00 p.m. I sat for a moment longer, then stood. By the time I stepped outside, the company Slack was already lit up with Marcus's victory lap. Thrilled to announce a major back-end refactor initiative designed to reduce code debt and improve investor transparency. Today, we take our next step towards scalable innovation. The post had 4 fire emojis, 2 claps, and somewhere in the comments, someone wrote, "Sad to see Julia go. Her legacy will live in the logs forever." I didn't even make it to the subway. I ducked into a small cafe, bought a coffee, sat at a quiet table, and just stared at the condensation running down the cup. Empty. Not sad, not angry, just vacuumed. And then something flickered. Not rage, not yet. Something cleaner, sharper. Focus. I pulled out my phone, searched my own GitHub repo, and checked the last download timestamp. 34 minutes ago. That meant someone inside the company had triggered a build after I was fired, using my library. My unlicensed, explicitly commercial use restricted library. I tapped to reread the clause I'd added years ago, long before I knew this company would ever exist. Section 5C. For-profit entities using this software and internal operations must secure a commercial license agreement with the original author. No ambiguity, no loopholes. They were in breach, and I had everything. Every integration logged, every metadata hash, every CI/CD ping timestamped and archived. I hadn't built a library. I'd built a live, pulsing fingerprint tracker embedded into every service they now ran their business on. They didn't just fire me, they fired the foundation. And they did it with zero comprehension of what kept their architecture alive. Marcus didn't realize it, but by cutting me loose, he hadn't saved the company money. He had just tossed a lit match into a warehouse full of dry paper and gasoline. I finished my coffee, tossed the cup into the recycling, pulled out my phone again, and messaged Tina, my old college roommate, now a partner at a boutique tech IP law firm. "Hey, you still do license enforcement?" Tina replied. "Only when it's fun." "Good," I texted. I've got a live one. Multi-million-dollar usage. No contract. Tina, my favorite flavor. I stood, feeling the ache return to my limbs. It wasn't adrenaline. It was a quiet kind of fuel, the kind you pour slow and steady before lighting the fuse. I walked home, booted my personal machine, opened a private repo, and dropped a zip file labeled Revoke Trigger. Then I began to write. Not code, not scripts, not yet. I started outlining the invoice. Itemized, time-tracked, tied to specific services, each charge linked directly to active usage of my licensed product. No anger, no shouting, just math. Cold, relentless math. They wanted to save money. I was about to show them what it cost. Tina looked over the license text twice, then a third time. We sat in a downtown cafe with peeling brick walls and overpriced pour-overs, laptops glowing between us like evidence exhibits in a murder trial. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Tina's eyes narrowed to razors as she traced the lines of my custom OSS clause. Jesus Christ, Tina muttered. This isn't just a gray area. This is open season liability with receipts. I sipped my coffee, black. I kept the clause buried in the repo subdirectory for years. No one ever asked. Tina leaned back. They should have, because the second they ran this in a for-profit environment without written permission, they legally parked a tanker truck on your front lawn and started siphoning oil without paying. She flipped her screen around. Here, this is your damage calculation baseline. By GitHub's own metrics, they've downloaded updates to the package 26 times in the last 90 days. You've got multiple integration logs with their domain hard-coded. And this function here, internal worker panic recovery. It's still timestamping outbound error reports with your signature hash. I nodded. I told them it was legacy. They thought legacy meant disposable. Tina smirked, then tapped out a few lines in a shared doc. Invoice, licensing violation, commercial internal use, Company X Corp. Total usage, 88 runtime instances across 14 services. Rate, $7,500 per instance. Total, $660,000. Additional penalties for non-disclosure, plus $25,000. Cease and desist, draft attached. She slid it over. We can send this tomorrow. Hell, I could walk it over in a tuxedo and a brass band if you want, but you've already got them nailed. I stared at the screen for a long time. I reached out, closed the lid, and said, Not yet. Tina blinked. Why? I want them to feel it, I said, calm as a monk on morphine. Not the invoice, the absence. That night, I built a dashboard, not flashy, just a terminal-fed monitoring page pulling from public uptime pings, status page deltas, and third-party chatter. I scraped Twitter, Reddit, and API discussion boards, set up keyword alerts for things like ad delay, background job stuck, invoice sync failing. Every time a thread went up about the platform misbehaving, I marked it. When a dev posted a cry for help about flaky login sessions or overnight 500 errors, I screen capped it. When a user complained their billing data was lagging 3 days behind, I timestamped and added it to the folder. The first hit came 2 days after I was let go. A startup founder tweeted, "Is Company X Corp down again? A timeout 3 times this week." This new update broke more than it fixed. I smiled and logged the link. I noticed the time of the tweet matched almost exactly with when they'd last pulled my OSS package. The next day, another post, noticing weird behaviors with Company X Corp's webhook processor. Anyone else seeing duplicate invoices? I didn't respond. I didn't warn them. I just watched. 1 week later, my GitHub profile showed a spike, a 500% increase in download traffic for the library. A single IP showed 18 pulls in a 6-hour window. I knew that IP. It belonged to their internal Jenkins box. They were panicking, and they were reaching deep into a system they didn't understand, running builds on code they no longer had the right to touch. I opened the invoice again, adjusted the total. $660,000 became $2.5 million. Tina called me the next morning. "You sure you want to hold?" "Yes," I replied. "Let them bleed a little first." I wasn't playing for money anymore. I was playing for the echo, the ripple, the moment Marcus would stand in front of the board, hands trembling, pretending everything was under control while the entire infrastructure turned to static behind him. I could already see it, not because I hoped, but because I knew. It started with login lag, just a few seconds at first. Nothing worth a severity 1 ticket. Then the ad sync service started choking during peak hours. Emails went out late. Invoices duplicated themselves like rabbits on meth. The junior devs huddled in Slack, muttering about queue poisoning and timing mismatches, which really meant, we don't know what the hell we're looking at. Then the status page lied. They'd rigged it for proactive transparency, aka smoke and mirrors. Everything showed green, even as customers were flooding the support inbox with bug-eyed rage. One client emailed, "Our monthly invoices are tripled. My accountant thinks we've been hacked. What the hell is going on inside Company X Corp?" Engineers flailed like cats tossed into a swimming pool. They reopened my old branches, hoping to salvage something usable, but no one understood how the services meshed. Marcus's scalable architecture was a Frankenstein of half-baked microservices and repackaged API wrappers, duct-taped to buzzword-laden chaos. The job scheduler I'd written, the one that smart-throttled cron loads across data centers based on queue lag, was gone. Marcus had called it over-engineered and replaced it with a Zapier chain and 3 Lambda functions that ate memory like a stoned elephant. By Friday, half the product's core features were failing at random. Marcus, of course, blamed everything but himself. AWS latency, misconfigured YAML, a rogue intern. At one point, he even blamed solar flares. Solar flares, his Slack update read. Q3 platform inconsistencies traced to legacy cron fragmentation and outdated queue listeners. Migration was necessary. We will iterate forward. Translation? I broke it. I have no idea how to fix it. Please clap. I read the post while eating leftover pad thai on my couch, the lights low. My cat purring like a chainsaw beside me. I didn't laugh. I simmered. Because behind every broken feature, every panicked engineer, every frantic Slack ping was one single truth. They were still using my library, still pinging my endpoints, still riding on top of infrastructure they didn't pay for. And it was cracking. The tipping point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I saw the tweet before my notifications even caught up. Our client data at Company X Corp got scrambled. Names and IDs mismatched in export. This is bad. Was told background jobs failed last night. Anyone else seeing this? Attached was a screenshot of a corrupted export file. The fields were out of order, timestamps missing, user IDs duplicated. I zoomed in on the error code visible in the corner. Job worker 17 on failure. Panic recovery triggered. I didn't have to guess. That function lived deep in my library, one of the legacy background job handlers I'd built to sanitize orphan threads in multi-tenant environments. It only triggered if the task queue collapsed entirely, which meant they'd hit the wall hard. And they were still running my code, still unlicensed, still blind. I pulled open my dashboard. Traffic was spiking again. Massive surges hitting my public GitHub repo. They were trying to trace the issue, praying for answers inside a repo they never paid to understand. I opened my invoice draft and highlighted a line. Background task misuse causing client data corruption, plus $400,000 penalty for breach escalation. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just saved the change. Then I opened Twitter and bookmarked the thread. Not to retweet, not to dunk, just to have it ready for later. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the first crack in the glass. And I knew what came next. When brittle systems fail, they don't bend. They shatter. Marcus called it the clean slate push. He announced it in the Monday stand-up with the swagger of a man who just read a Harvard Business Review article and thought it made him a general. "We're deploying v3.eo tonight," he said, arms crossed, standing under a projector slide that read, "Modernization through momentum. No rollback, full replacement of legacy services. This is how we earn investor trust." Not a single engineer looked him in the eye because they knew what he didn't. The rewrite wasn't stable. The billing engine barely worked. The new notification queue ran on third-party middleware no one had vetted, and the core sync services still quietly, desperately relying on my library to keep the machine from grinding to metal. But Marcus was done pretending. He wanted optics. He wanted a headline for the next board meeting. So, at 11:54 p.m., with no rollback plan, no sandbox testing, and only a Slack thread of nervous engineers as support, he pushed the full deployment. And the system screamed. Within 6 minutes, 38% of user sessions began failing. By the 10-minute mark, background workers froze. Ad payment retries started stacking into an infinite loop, auto-charging some accounts multiple times. A client posted in a private forum, "Our users are being triple billed. We need answers now!" Internally, it was chaos. The junior devs were crying in Slack. The SREs had locked down the cloud dashboard and were manually trying to kill runaway pods. The new architecture's logging layer hadn't even been finished. There was no telemetry, just fire. At 12:33 a.m., one of the older engineers, the last of my hires who hadn't yet jumped ship, made a choice. He reverted to the last stable branch, the one with my library. He didn't tell Marcus. He didn't ask permission. He just SSH'd into the build system and kicked off a redeploy. No Slack notification, no Jira ticket, just a commit note. Hotfix, revert to functional. And in that moment, I felt it. Sitting in my apartment, headphones on, watching old Columbo reruns, I caught the ping. My GitHub webhook burst to life. Requests plus 247%, top IP, internal.companyxcorp.net, refereer, Jenkins V2325 CI triggered hotfix/revert to functional. I froze. They were pulling my code again. After termination, after revocation, after multiple internal memos warning about modernization. I opened the CI logs. There it was. Version 1.42 of my library pulled and embedded into their new containers, not even through a proxy, direct from my public repo, with my watermark still intact. I stared at the logs, watched as their usage ticked up. Over 1,000 function calls an hour, ad services, queue processing, invoice rebalancing. My code didn't just keep the engine running. It was the engine. They had no license, no right, no clue, and now, no plausible deniability. I reached over to my legal folder, opened the invoice, and clicked duplicate. New line item added. Post-termination usage of proprietary OSS library, $1.1 million Q2 estimate, tiered retroactive rates applied. Attached to it, a time-stamped GitHub webhook log, the full IP trace, and CI job references proving internal integration after employment termination. Legally bulletproof. I closed my laptop. I didn't need to celebrate. The scoreboard was doing that for me. They could try patching, blaming, rewriting all they wanted, but in the end, they were leaning on the very foundation they tried to erase. And that foundation had a fuse wired straight to my hand. The invoice went out at 9:01 a.m. on a Wednesday. I scheduled the send, clicked the button, then sat back and watched it disappear like a torpedo gliding under the surface. Silent, deadly, pre-guided by months of precision. Subject: Commercial license breach invoice and notice of pending disclosure. Body: Dear Legal Counsel, Company X Corp. Please find attached an itemized invoice for the unauthorized commercial use of the MLEB open source software across your internal systems, as well as a breakdown of post-termination usage, which constitutes a violation of Section 5C of the published license agreement. Usage has been monitored continuously and corroborated by access logs, public GitHub metrics, internal commit references, and CI/CD job artifacts. All data has been independently verified. Attached is itemized usage report, version service runtime hours, retroactive licensing rate sheet, summary of breach timeline, evidence folder index, cease and desist draft with 72-hour embargo. The total amount due for Q1 Q2 licensing, $2,514,000 USD. If no response is received within 72 hours, I will proceed with public disclosure of license violations, including publication to GitHub, LinkedIn, and relevant developer legal forums. Respectfully, Julia Smith. I'd attach the invoice as a clean PDF. No bold fonts, no passive-aggressive highlights, just numbers, cold, verifiable numbers. 34 production services tagged, 27,110 total runtime hours, version references logged against build IDs, my watermark hash present in every compiled binary. The cease and desist letter was tucked into a separate attachment, professionally written by Tina, and addressed not to Marcus, but to the General Counsel of Company X Corp. The language was surgical. No threats, just statements of fact. Every violation mapped, every clause quoted. I didn't CC Marcus, didn't BCC the board, just straight to legal, the kind of move that skipped every ladder climber in the middle and landed on the one person who knew exactly what that invoice meant. Then I sat back, waited. By 9:23, my GitHub webhook lit up again. They were pulling my library again. I almost laughed. By 10:02, a message appeared in my inbox from Marcus Collins. Subject: License breach notice. Message: Let's talk. That was it. No apology, no denial, no counter. Just a pathetic string of corporate desperation typed from some sunlit corner office where the AC was probably broken because the climate control still relied on a service I wrote in T1. I didn't hesitate. I hovered over the message for a moment, then clicked delete. Not archive, not flag, delete. Because they weren't going to talk. They were going to pay, or they were going to burn. I opened my phone, tapped into my Notes app, and wrote one word. Friday. That was the 72-hour mark. That was when the silence would end. My lawyer was on standby. GitHub, README update queued. LinkedIn post drafted. And if they didn't wire the full amount by the deadline, I'd let the entire tech world know that the same company bragging about open innovation had built their empire on stolen bones. And their CTO? He was about to find out what elegance looked like when it hit back. The boardroom smelled like lemons and panic. They called it an emergency strategy sync, but the panic was written all over the invite. Flagged red, all caps, mandatory, urgent IP action items. Nobody even pretended to sip coffee. Legal was already there when Marcus arrived. 2 laptops open, a stack of printed logs fanned out like a prosecutor's exhibit pile. The CFO spoke first. We received a commercial licensing invoice this morning from a former employee, $2.5 million, backdated, accompanied by a cease and desist. Why weren't we informed of this risk? Marcus, dressed for defense in a tieless blazer, tried to play it cool. We did a full architecture revamp. The code in question wasn't proprietary. It was OSS. She didn't build it for the company. Legal cut in, voice sharp as a gavel. She didn't have to. The open source license includes an internal use clause. It's been legally valid since 2018, and we've confirmed the company systems have been in breach for at least 14 months, including post-termination usage. The CTO's smirk faltered. The General Counsel tapped a folder. We pulled our own commit history, Jenkins logs, Docker containers, and CI references. all traced back to her repo. We've got active systems running her code as of this morning. A board member leaned forward, eyes like bullets. Did you know her software required a commercial license? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence hung like a noose. Did you? The CFO repeated. Or did you not know? Marcus tried to pivot. It was an oversight. Our legal team never flagged. The HR lead interrupted, voice trembling. She was terminated without severance. No IP agreement was filed during offboarding. Her laptop was deactivated before the standard compliance check. There's no paper trail of consent for continued use of her assets. The room dropped to a hush. Then legal added, almost as an afterthought, also, her attorney is very real, very loud, and has already hinted they are prepared to publish a licensing breach summary to public developer channels by Friday. The CFO leaned back, rubbing her temple. What you're telling us is, we not only fired the person who kept our infrastructure breathing, but we also built our post-layoff services on top of her software without permission, and she has proof? Legal. Down to the function call. Someone in the room whispered. We're screwed. Marcus tried one last Hail Mary. We can negotiate, settle it down, offer equity or a smaller payout. No, legal snapped. She's not bluffing. She knows exactly what she's doing. She itemized runtime hours. We've already seen chatter online. If this leaks, we're a tech pariah. No trust, no customers. And then came the final gut punch that afternoon. My phone lit up with a message from a friend at another SaaS firm. Screenshot attached. A new landing page. Competitor name. Now proudly powered by Melib TM. We do it right. Licensed, secure, scalable. I stared at it for a moment, then slowly exhaled through my nose. I hadn't said a word publicly. No interviews, no blog posts, no tweets. I let the silence do the damage. But someone else, someone smart, had seen the storm brewing and decided to ride the wave. They'd reached out weeks ago, actually, back when I quietly added a contact for enterprise licensing line to my repo's README. No PR, no announcement, just a door left open for people who knew how to knock. And now, the first one had walked through. Meanwhile, Marcus was in a corner office, losing control of his voice, his narrative and his throne, drowning in a boardroom that smelled less like lemon and more like blood. I, meanwhile, didn't move. I watched it all unfold in silence, vindicated, focused, still holding the trigger. And Friday hadn't even come yet. They pushed Marcus out on a Thursday. No announcement, no goodbye post, no press release full of lies about new adventures, just a line buried at the bottom of a board memo. Effective immediately, Marcus Collins will be stepping away from day-to-day operations to pursue other opportunities. Translation: we gave him the rope, and he tied the knot himself. He left behind a data center running on duct tape, broken morale, and a $2.5 million invoice shaped like a guillotine. HR offered him a golden parachute in exchange for an NDA. He took it. He always took the deal. That's what guys like Marcus do. They trade damage for silence and call it strategy. But I wasn't Marcus. When legal reached back out, palms sweating, through polite phrases like amicable resolution and mutual off-ramping, dangling a $1.75 million hush payout and a confidentiality clause so thick it came with its own table of contents, I didn't even open the PDF. My reply was a single sentence. The full invoice will be honored, or the cease and desist goes public. They paid in full. Wire confirmation arrived Friday morning. I sat on my balcony when it came through, watching the city stir awake. No champagne, no dramatic tears, just coffee, a fresh notepad, and the calm weight of justice delivered on my own terms. By noon, my GitHub inbox was full. Developers asking about the license, startups inquiring about partnerships, one recruiter from a big tech name trying to play it cool with, "We loved your approach to IP clarity. Any interest in discussing staff roles?" But it was the DM from a 3-time founder that caught my eye. The guy had been early at one unicorn, burned out a second, now bootstrapping something raw but promising. DM: "Hey, we're using MLEB, fully licensed. Watching how you handled all this. Masterclass. We're building something ambitious. No VC parasites, just product. Want to come build it with us?" I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit while I took a walk. No destination, just motion. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding a code base together with my own sanity. Wasn't fighting to be heard in a room of people who only knew how to talk. I was choosing. The next morning, I walked into a co-working space on the east side. Big windows, air that didn't smell like ozone and existential dread. Someone had scrawled "Welcome Julia" in dry erase across the whiteboard above a simple desk. There was no assigned seating, just a contract printed on thick paper, a good pen, and a line at the bottom that said CTO. I picked up the pen. As the ink dried, my phone buzzed with a final ping. A push notification from the same company that fired me, stripped my access, and built their empire on my backbone. Company X Corp. Will be undergoing scheduled maintenance this weekend to improve service stability. Translation: the patch failed. The damage stuck. The ghosts are still in the pipes. I smiled, not with spite, but with peace. Because now, the library was mine again. My name was on it. My rules powered it. My future stretched out ahead, clean as a new repo. And no one would ever steal my code without consequence again. This story offers a powerful lesson. True value often lies beneath the surface, not in superficial appearances or buzzwords. Julia's inelegant code was the backbone of the company, proving that functionality and reliability are paramount in technology. For individuals, the message is clear. Know your worth and protect your intellectual property. Don't let others dismiss your contributions, especially when they are foundational to success. Always be prepared, document your work, and understand your rights. For organizations, the story highlights the dangers of short-sighted leadership and prioritizing optics over substance. Underestimating the long-term impact of experienced talent and failing to understand the true dependencies within your systems can lead to catastrophic consequences. Ultimately, it's a positive reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, can be achieved when you stand firm on your principles and leverage your true expertise. Your skills are your power, and no one can take that away without consequence.